Good afternoon. The final lecture will be presented for the 4 days of events about the reference of the next season of Inspira Mais, presenting the preview for Leather 2023 Underline 1 under the coordination of Marney Carminacci with the participation of Walter Rodrigues and the design management consultants Daniel Pormelese and Ramon Soares. We'd like to thank everyone who is with us up until now, and we remind you that the lectures of segmented inspirations will be available through August. Check out our programming on the social network and schedule yours. Inspira Mais has the sponsorship of Cipatex, Altero, Basf, Bertex, Granil, Brisa, Camille Lesion, Camaleoa, Colograph, Endutex Brasil, FCC, Grupo Cofrag, Grupo Stigfran, JR Soluções, Leather Labs, ATB, Soares, and York. Organized by Brazil, Tex Brazil, Brazilian Leather, and Brazilian Furniture. Partnering with Sebrae and promoted by Asintecal, Abiti, CICB, Abimóvel, and Apex Brazil. Let us now watch the video of our master sponsor for Inspira Mais, Cipatex. And then, with you, Marney, Walter, Daniel, and Ramon. Time. Everything changes. Everything transforms. It even changes the way we see time. The more it goes by, the more valuable it becomes. The more we respect it, the more we understand it. And it's from its hands that we receive the most valuable gift that life can give us, experience. And it is what reveals to us the greatest secret of all, that time, in fact, is not the division between past, present, and future, but rather the sum of these three elements, where the result is eternity of art, of feelings, and of the soul. And it is this timelessness that inspires our fashion, and to translate this beauty that lives forever. Come and discover this at Inspira Mais 2022. Good afternoon. We're here at the final day of Inspira Mais with the lecture Preview of Leather 2021-22 with the topic Leather. And we have several guests. With me today is Walter Rodrigues, our nucleus coordinator, Ramon Soares, our manager for design and a leather technician, and Daniel Pormelese, all the way from São Paulo, connected with us. We're very pleased in this semester because we designed several articles and concepts in our collection, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them. But to contextualize our topic a little bit more that Walter presented this morning, we're going to talk about how the leather preview understood this proposal of the body. We understand or believe that the body is a registry of time and of human history related to social, cultural, economic, and especially behavioral elements. Today, we need to think of the body as a whole, going beyond barriers. Walter. Is that a true statement? Absolutely. I think that we're living in a period where the body has taken on a proportion in relation to everything that happens. It's huge, it's giant. We started paying much more attention to all the circumstances involving the body. All the aspects of the pandemic, or health, or performing our life performance, quality of life, and understanding the movements of the body, and even more. All the communication that's being sent from very important concepts, which are the bodies, the several bodies that we have within the history of fashion, and at this time in fashion, that we need to dress. So I think it's a moment of democratization in the sense of expanding this look to various possibilities of various different bodies, and to bring, as you would say, the cultural, historical aspects that remain very connected with this idea of the body and how we can build all of this in products. I think here today, our exercise is to think in a certain way within this limit and parameter of the body and how to transform this into fashion products. Marvelous. We talk a lot about the body and leather, which has an ancestral relationship with the body. Leather comforts, it brings warmth, it's impermeable. And within this principle, we developed with the participants in the leather preview several articles that explore these characteristics, as well as the conceptual characteristics, which we have within our 2023/1 research. We're going to start with Couro, and who's going to share with us a bit more about these incredible materials that were launched and that were built is Daniel. Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel. I'm the design manager for the leather preview and for Couro. We developed incredible materials. The first two have waxed finishings. There's depth. There's a nice gloss. All the material is built using chrome-free materials. And today, chrome-free means soft materials and also more rough materials. Materials that are more structured. We see a croc pattern. Gives it a burnt look, sort of a bronzed body. So we have this waxy finish with a burnished background that's ideal for boots, for structured bags. These are incredible materials that were really cool. So Dani, we were able to make some prototypes with our long-term partners, the Arezzo Group, and the boots came out wonderful, remembering that the conceptual perspective for these products was a waxy aspect of the luster and markings in this leather, and it's impressive how they came out so wonderful in the application. There's so much depth. This waxiness created a touch that's lighter on top and darker in the bottom. It's incredible. We can really see in these boots how this leather worked well for this type of product. Great, Dani. Following, we'll see, Dani, how we talk about destroyer. We study this aspect, which could be a bit worn out, but we look at the drape and the volume of the material. Tell us a little bit about this adventure. Yes, in these two materials, we worked with weight, with the sensation of durability, the sensation of materials that were used by time. So we were able to see that the material has width for this. It has a touch for this. And it has this type of finishing, which is worn. as if it had been used quite a bit, with this sensation of time, something that lasted a long time and is worn by time. And in this other one, we worked with something a bit more sanded, more worn, physically speaking. Here's a smaller croc print that you can wear on a jacket or a shoe with less area. But it has this more rustic look, more worn look. Awesome, Dani. These articles that we are seeing so far, these last two, for example, are articles which can be used in apparel as well. Yes, for jackets, especially for jackets, because it has a really good weight for sleeves, for collars, for it to have this robust aspect. Awesome. Now, continuing the materials developed by Couro, we have 3 materials. 2 of them are working with the gold theme, which was a really important aspect of the research. Walter, do you want to comment a little about this reference of gold and how this has been representing a very strong characteristic in terms of concepts of fashion? Yes, I think it's important to talk about this because the major reference for gold right now, the gold tone, the material gold, are the last collections by Schiaparelli, both of Haute Couture and Prêt-à-Porter, where we see the impact of the body covered in gold. Daniel, not our Daniel, but Daniel Schiaparelli has done a great work in how to sculpt some parts of costume jewelry or metal or something like that, worked with this gold tone. So I think it has to do with this current time to value the body, almost giving a godlike quality to the body, putting the body on a pedestal. Awesome. If we're going to talk about the atmosphere of time and the design of time and think about art, art drew the body for a long time for fashion, exactly, with very clear moments where gold, a precious metal, and you can remember this throughout history. If we think about certain sculptures, if we think about what we call relics of the saints, the bodies of the saints were built of gold. And more recently, in the 1970s, the Alani couple made gold parts to be used in the dresses. So it's intrinsic in these thoughts and these moments of fashion. In a certain sense, if we remember the 70s, it was the peak of the freedom of the body. And what we're living through right now is so interesting because the wheel of culture and history, and especially fashion, is eternally spinning. And once again, we have this perception of the importance of the body and the place of the body in history. That's marvelous. So now, we're continuing to see this material created by Dani. Dani, I confess, I'm in love with this material. We're enchanted by this. This material is a well-known print at Couro. It's a print that's well used, but we worked with it in a new way, using this gold tone, which is part of this theme that brings this idea of luxury, and a body covered in gold. And we took it to the next level. We brought 2 layers of gold, more of a dyed level, and then another layer on top. That's marvelous. Here we have another material that's super important, which was a very significant reference in the research. The research, of course, is done by a group of designers and with the special touch of our coordinator. Walter, one of the important points that really stood out in this season was the glassy, and how these elements once again take on an important role in the fashion editorials and the thoughts of the artists. What are your thoughts on this finishing? I think that we come at a time that we presented this week and that you followed with me with a perception of the perceived value of leather. We talked a lot about this, especially in tones that are more natural, that are more classical. And I think that to create a differential and to enchant in this glassy effect that we're applying on the hides, we create this ultra shine. It's to create even more added value, because then the leather will go to that level of high luxury. And this glossiness and their shine perpetuates this idea. Danielle, we saw on the screen several images of what I can call sort of a varnish and how it looks with the light and with movement. Tell us a little bit, what type of product do you imagine that people can create with this? And how can we think about it in the three most important segments: footwear, accessories, and apparel? I think it can be thought of for all three segments, but I see it in more ample pieces, bags that are larger and that have this drape and that can reveal this glossiness that's so beautiful. It has a very glass-like effect, as Walter said, and that in larger pieces, both in apparel or bags, it really shows off as a material. It almost looks like a candy. It's beautiful. It almost looks like a caramelized effect. So now we're going to move on to another venture of another colleague, Ramon Soares, known as Golden Ramon. Ramon, we're glad that you're with us. And I was very happy with our development of Fuga, which was the cannery that developed these colors. When we talked about the body, we talked a lot about the hide. And many images brought these nuances of the skin or the hide. And when we developed this articles, we talked with Ramon and we said it needs to be an article that has this essence of the hide. And he says, we're going to make a floater, which is going to be incredible. And we've seen floater taking over the last collections of the most interesting brands that we have throughout the world. What was it like to develop these articles? And tell us a little more about them. Well, floater has been in the media for a long time. And we tried to develop this, capturing the idea of the leather with the sensibility and the characteristics which the hide had. When it's on the animal, it maintains these characteristics. In other words, we left finishing show all the imperfections and all the naturality. We also tried in this process to work with sustainability, making processes that are faster and have a lower volume of water with less environmental impact, thinking ever since the beginning how to make this product. And the finishing is supernatural. It's a base dye and a light finishing with a simple level of protection. Will favor cleaning, not allow it to get dirty, and in the handling, not pick up dust or oils. And it's a durable product to make footwear, bags. As you can see here, if we can reduce the width, we can use it in clothing. Its uses are various. And so we were able to transmit this in the photos with the naturality of the body. The body seems to be talking with us. What we did, what we participated in, and it really came out good. There are collections that when we did the prototypes at our factory, the factory owner said he wanted to take that and get it for him. And I said, we have to be very assertive. This shows that the work was well done. And what's cool about it all is to capture the idea that Walter showed us and take it to the factory floor, selling the idea and then taking the final product as it's shown here. Ramon, you know that you'll spend the whole afternoon with us here, so you can slow down. You don't have. I want you to show us a little more. I thought it was sensational. The golden that we did with the pigment. Edson, please focus on this leather here that he's going to get from the display. Normally, the leather that we use with a metallized or golden effect use a foil. But this was done with a dye, and we used a product called injojin. It was like a golden powder. It was like I grated the mineral, and the small particles I put into the dye. And it gave us this material, which is wonderful, with a great touch, without losing the natural characteristic of leather. Normally, when we talk about finishing, if you're not careful, it plastifies it. It takes it in a different direction without that natural aspect of leather. So in these finishings, and other colors as well as this one, we were very careful to maintain a silky touch that really feel like a hide. That's great. And what's coolest is that when we have the images of the shoes that were made, and we already have them in the background, and we'll see them in the video, we can see how this texture ends up creating a new sensation. Here we have a loafer by Schutz, one of our partners, collaborators in the production of the prototypes, which represent the color chart and other materials in the collection. And it's impressive that even though this material is incredible, in this model, which is very popular, there's one in each color. How can we do this? So, you'll see in the video now the details of the prototypes, and they really are fantastic. The soles are super cool, and literally, the leather here becomes a protagonist because the texture writes and designs what we've been imagining about leather, about hide, about protection. Continuing, Ramon, we did a series of bags with some of the color chart colors. And it also had awesome movement and the imprinting of these textures. Ramon, the shoes are to match the bags. I have to do that. If not, I'm going to suffer at home. The jacket could be for me. But what's most important is for us to have the same material used in two different products, but it could have been used in a third one with no problem. It describes, it tells a story of texture, and for us, that's very important. Following our benchmarks, we have two aspects, one destroyed and one very wrinkled. This wrinkled is the idea is to sell this to the people in production. There's no print here. It's a handmade job. It's all done by hand, where it fixes the design and then goes to finishing. It's a fantastic work. It's used in bags, in clothing. It's really cool. It looks like a rawhide. Thanks, Ramon. Ramon, just like Couro that made everything chrome-free, and all these who are searching for this, are your materials chrome-free? I'm sorry. Friends, since the beginning, we've worked with sustainability, and all our leathers were developed chrome-free. So not only did we reduce working with compact tanning, everything was done chrome-free. That's great. And now we're seeing a video of seeing a very weathered material. Exactly. This finishing is basically raw. If we observe, if you know anything about leather, you can see the veins of the animal. We left the characteristics of leather. throughout the entire life of the animal, his history, his story is told. Walter, within these topics, this idea of destroyed has a very heavy way of reading it if we think about the 80s, etc. But within the preview project, we had several references that built this relationship with the destroyed. Just like gold, the idea of behavior that's been happening throughout the world, do you believe that this can influence this handmade look for finishing with wear, a more punk look? I think so. I think there's a very interesting fact which we have to think about, which is some generations with purchasing power did not experience the 80s. So in some ways, the images of this iconic decade of change, and especially lots of revolt, if we're talking about the end of the 70s, where we had the punk movement, and we can talk about the deconstructionism of the Japanese. I always get tripped up on that word, but all of this is about a new perception of the materials, and it's what we're experiencing today. When we talk about upcycling, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about reuse of materials. So naturally, the leather takes on these aspects based on the destroyed, allowing some brands to work with leather that already exists in the market, reinterpreting this. And this is very interesting as a point of view of the market, of small brands reusing jackets or shoes that already exist and bringing this reference of this leather. I would say it's like an activist leather. It communicates this idea of activism and rebellion. This activism is currently very necessary. So you're writing this down with us. We've talked about waxed finishing and burnt finishings. We've talked about glassy finishings. And we talked about destroyed and golden. So if you're producing something or thinking about it, use these references because they're going to blow up pretty soon. Another very important point in the research are rubbery or cast finishing. This is a cast finishing, giving it a very smooth finish, allowing several productions and modeling. Every side has its opposite. Just like we looked at the floaters that were soft and then were materials with more comfort, there's also the need to make materials that are more structured. Here, for example, we developed a vegetable leather that's very structured, very armored for bags that don't have a drape. Suitcases, also looking a bit like saddle leather. Boots, horseback riding. This line is a counterpoint to the soft. Ramon, one of the things that I noticed in this material, especially, is the possibility of not having to use a lining. Does that make sense? It makes sense, yes. We produce it at a slightly thicker width, and a bit more structured. The channels worked as if it was a second finishing, avoiding the use of lining, and therefore lowering the production cost. If you get leather and you put in a lining, you add cost, and this impacts the final cost of the shoe. So this is a type of finishing that allows you to make the item, the bag or the sandal or the boot, without using a lining. The lining is already part of the leather itself. And this is the idea of the leather preview, bringing a diversified collection of articles, because not all of them live with a single article in the collection. And when we talk about leather, it provides this possibility to have various layers of finishing and possibilities. If we think about it today, materials that can be used in a more practical manner, such as these with no lining, we can reduce hours of energy, hours of machine consumption, and this will add up to our final calculation, helping the environment and the characteristics of these materials. Ramon, we also have something talking about glassy, but here our shine seems very natural. Let's look at this. Here, The basis is the same as the floater, but the finishing has a glossiness that doesn't look like plastic. It's a very natural shine. It would be a supernatural product. It would have what we call casein. This is a product that comes from milk and eggs, where you make a product that provides this natural finishing. It's not a polyurethane. It's not an acrylic or a resin. It's a very natural product that gives it this characteristic. It's like you put a slight layer on top of the leather, creating a natural view, but with shine that's not plasticky. This is awesome, and we continue to look at the theme of glassiness, looking at the possibility of leather from the wrinkled varnish of Daniel and this medium-high glossiness, and we've been seeing this a lot in footwear and accessories. Very well, Leather Labs. Leather Labs is a great partner that we have, and for 2 or 3 seasons they've been with us, and they've been doing excellent work selling leather online, something that helps other people because they have an institute that sews and develops and has craft and ancestral techniques with leather. Here, they're proposing to us a very oily leather, very soft. And if we talk about classic, it seems like a great classic. Yes, this leather is as if it was tanned only and then oiled and nothing else. It has drape, it has naturality, it has texture, it has a super enjoyable touch, and in handling, it does a superposition of color, which lightens the background, showing the dye and the base. This is wonderful. Possibilities of great accessories. Walter. Today, especially in fashion and in clothing and apparel, we have few brands that use leather. And is that because of technical challenges in making these materials? Or do those of us who work in the tanneries, are we not developing enough articles for clothing apparel? I think it's both. I have an understanding that leather clothing always sells. There's always a market for it. We have brands with a history that is built based on selling this product. But what I think that changed today is that we've been talking for some time about the idea of timelessness, the idea of perceived value of leather. So people are really understanding that paying more for a leather item is worth it because it lasts longer in people's closets. So I think it's a perception and a matter of educating the consumer regarding their money and to do so with sustainability. At the same time, we see a search for materials that are incredible by these brands. And I've seen, especially in Rio Grande do Sul, the arrival of new brands, especially in Caxias where I live, where there's 3 or 4 young designer brands working exclusively with leather. So I think there's a desire again. It's related to the idea of the body, of the skin, but there is a subconscious desire of this wonderful material. And there is no other answer. It's like hide on hide. I think here in the preview, we have this concern, and all our partners here participate, but I'm on the other side trying to find a way to decodify this, to bring to you options and how to transform this. And I'm always enchanted with the possibilities that we have for beautiful materials, for tanneries that are extremely hardworking and very dedicated to understanding the directions that we provide and transforming this in fantastic materials. Obviously, this has a positive commercial response, and along with Inspira Mais, we're able to allow the communication of these materials to find these people. And we'll have what I call sort of a courtship. You ask me, are people searching this? And I say that people are discovering this through Inspira Mais, this great possibility of this material that Brazilians make like no one else. We work with leather like nobody else. So I think that from here on, there's a trend for growth. Yes. Great. That's great news. Ramon, I'm young in this story, despite the fact that I don't have any more hair. But leather is much more than leather. It's a family. We have various families throughout all of Brazil that have been making leather articles for over a century. So let's not toot our own horn too much, because you know what it's like, where we may be biased. But continuing this Leather Labs effort, we have two incredible articles. These articles are extremely well finished, and the idea option for footwear and accessories. What footwear? Tennis shoes. This Napa, especially the red Napa, is for the inverse of footwear. It's for the universe of footwear. Why? Because almost everything today looks like a tennis shoe. It's impressive how this material is resistant and has the capacity for light, incredible capacity for color, and once again, we can use it without necessarily thinking about lining. So we use models that don't use linings because we'll be valuing this material. Using this material with lining of fabrics or other materials, it's almost like lowering the quality of the product. Just a comment. Leather keeps the characteristics it had in the animal when it was alive. When you use footwear that doesn't have a lining that separates it from your foot, it absorbs the humidity. And when you remove it, it breathes and goes away. And the next day, you can wear it again. If you isolate, it loses this absorption capacity, especially if you use a synthetic material. If you use leather, okay. But if you isolate it with a material that's not permeable, you lost this characteristic and this property of the leather, that which is its purpose. That's an important tip, because oftentimes the market keeps reproducing. Leather needs to understand how the material works best for the article that we're going to make. So we're here. Call us for us to talk. Another incredible product is a product by Nova Couro, which is Pirarucu. It's a completely Brazilian product, you could say. Tell us a little bit about this little fish. Nova Couro has a beautiful story. Ever since they began working with Pirarucu fish, at the beginning, the hides were all perforated because it had no value for the river people. They would fish just for survival, to eat its flesh, and they just throw out the hide. But they did a great project with the river people where they maintain the farming and they replace excess fish into nature, and they're able to slaughter the fish at a standard age without removing it from nature and with greater control. So today, the river peoples, with their local knowledge, help control the preservation of the fish. Now, besides the flesh, the leather generates income for these river people. In the north and northeast, there are families who work to farm these fish for the flesh and for the leather. Nova Couro's job is great. It's an effort which they call organic tannery. All the excess product, the residual water, the sludge, they fix the pH and it goes in as fertilizer into nature. There's no problems with soil pollution or polluting the water reservoirs. It's a great, great project. Ramon, this tannery of Nova Couro allows these hides to be biodegradable. It's better? Yes, certainly. If you compare the normal chrome tanning, it will last you your entire life. But if I put it into nature, I throw it out into the land, it degrades. The fish leather degrades much faster than chrome tanned. Chrome tanning is out of style. And going back to the initial project, we're working with biodegradable leather. We're going to get there. We're fixing the adjustments to say that after you throw out the shoe, it'll last X amount of time. And so we're working on this. That's really cool. This is the leather industry in the last 50 to 100 years. It's almost a science laboratory to adapting processes and cleaning more and more this whole supply chain. Let's go to the next one. Here, we're going to talk about trianitri, exotic leathers. All the exotic leathers that we have in the leather preview are certified by the Cities International and IBAMA. Nothing here is outside the rules or the context. There's very strict legislation regarding this material. Here we have a beautiful burnt and waxed and lustered effect. And I may be biased, but the python design is unreplaceable. There's nothing else that reproduces this characteristic. Very well. When we talk about Trianitri as a tannery, recently I was visiting them, and I was impressed with how the tanneries have invested. We come from a pandemic period where everyone is reducing their investments, and I enter Trianitri's tannery, and they're expanding their investments. The energy capture process all the way to internal processes. But what's most incredible is it's still the people that do the finishing. The coolest finishings, like this python, is done in a craft manner. It's painted like if it was a work of art on a screen. When we talk about exotics, we're talking about a product that has this characteristic and has the human hand inserted into the finishing. Walter, exotic materials for fashion and for clothing especially was a key protagonist. And we see several designers today that are rethinking the use of this. But I want to ask you, is exotic material fast fashion of large volume, or does it need to be thought of as high luxury? I think it's high luxury. And when you tell me that this important movement of Trianitri in terms of investments, even during the pandemic, once again shows that people are betting on what has a perceived value. And when we talk about exotic hides, we're talking about this exceptional rarity, manual work, painting, burnt effects, and all done one by one, adding perceived value when the product is ready that a person will really be willing to pay for. Instead of buying 4 bags in fast fashion, they'll save there and they'll buy 1 bag that will last longer in their closet. They call it a heritage bag that goes from one member to the next. We're talking about modern styles where you have examples of brands that are working with contemporary styles with these exotic elements. And we have Pirarucu and other leathers that are in this category. But python is fascinating throughout human history. If we think about Eve and the apple, it's always been fascinating. When I have the opportunity to see this, I think it's fantastic. And we have to understand that today there's a lot of questions about the relationship of the hides and the animals. And we have to understand that the country where where the animals come from. The flesh is used for consumption. The farms are there to farm to supply the market for the flesh. This is not hides taken from nature. There's no cruelty in the sense of removing an animal from the natural habitat, but for consumption. And so naturally, these hides come to fashion, making things more beautiful. It's wonderful what you just told us, because everyone who participates here is certified tanneries that seek within their supply chain to identify all the points outside the curve. In other words, traceability is the great search of the Brazilian market today. It's very important for you to touch on this, because oftentimes people believe that leather was made for shoes. No, we take advantage of a natural raw material and we put it back in a wonderful way. If you excuse me, it's really important for us to talk about traceability, because today, with all the impact that cattle production has on the environment, traceability is allowing us to see where this cow comes from, if they're being created in confinement or in farms that don't have proper conditions. This transparency will arrive to the consumer. When you buy the product, you'll buy that with all this information. So the tannery today is very concerned with all this information and to bring this transparency into the process. And I think that's genius. It's the movement that should happen with all the materials. But leather is really a pioneer in this sense. Exactly. Thank you for your comments. Let's move on. Here we have a super exotic hide with a crazy texture of a sea lion. It's formidable how this hide has this texture with manual finishing where you have 2 tones of leather. And when you do this, you allow the texture to grow and stand out. And it's just crazy how natural this is. It's surreal. The waves that appear are natural. It's not a print. It's not something that was brought about artificially. It's the natural texture. And we use a slightly darker dye to give it this used effect. It's almost like it's sweating. That's why we say the exotic materials need to be done with great responsibility, because it's high fashion. It's not disposable. It's not fast fashion. It's much closer to slow fashion. All right, folks, we're reaching the end, the last day of Inspira Mais Digital. And we want to thank you all for your presence. We're continually closer. Walter, a final message for our public. Well, I'm always pleased to be here and to be with these other 3 masters of leather. I want to thank all the tanneries that received us and do this great exchange. And this is the last time I can say goodbye to everyone. We're getting ready for the next edition. Wait, because we're coming. Yeah, that's great. Dani, a final message? An optimistic message? Well, I wanted to thank everyone. I wanted to thank Marley, Ramon, and Walter, and especially Couro, who made all this possible and receives me so well, and that brings these incredible articles to the project. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank Couro for us, for all their effort, and this awesome path that they're using with chrome-free materials. Ramon Goldenfinger, tell us, give us your final message. I am the bearer of good news. Everything's going to get better. We're going to survive this pandemic and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you. And everyone, we're going to say goodbye to one more Inspira Mais Digital. And you can still see all this on the platform. Check it out. And we wait to see you in the 2023 _1 edition.